Just relax. Everybody get into party.
Greetings and welcome, fellow barium-inists, fluoroscopists, and cross-table lateralists. I am your host, and I am not a radiology technician. Nope, I'm a technologist, and I've been in this field long enough to know that just because you came into my emergency room at 2 a.m. with a chronic back pain times 6 years does not mean the X-ray should be stabbed. This is the Radiology Technologist Podcast for Rad Tech by Rad Tech. Thanks for listening.
Hello and welcome to another live Q&A Radiology this Saturday, February 6th, 2021. This is a every week occurrence so far. This is our third or fourth week. I'm just hopping onto the Facebook group here to put the link to the live Q&A. I already announced it was coming. Where to go? I'll just post a new one. So we have a Facebook group, if you're not aware. Here's the live Q. How did I push that button? Q and A on YouTube. And then we're also sharing simultaneously on Clubhouse. We got a new Clubhouse room going. I know it's really hard to get in. I joined. I only got 2 invites. I gave them out. I now have 3 invites. I have offered them in the YouTube group. The first person to go to my contact form on the radiologictechnologist.com blog and request the invites. I will be happy to share those out. I'm going to guess weekly we are probably given invites to hand out, but you just never know to what degree they are going to give them. So let me just check here. Hello to everyone on. Thank you for the thumbs up already. Don't forget to put your questions in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer them. A lot of stuff going on this week. Now that we've said we're on YouTube Live, we're in Clubhouse, and the Clubhouse app is very easy to navigate. Like I said, the only hard part is getting in the door. Nevertheless, and the cool thing about Clubhouse is I can make you an admin in the discussion, and you can chat. You can talk. I can ask you questions. You can answer them. People in the comment section can ask you questions. So eventually, I want to get somebody from every modality in the Clubhouse room so that people that join in and want to ask questions about MRI or mammography or whatever modality can jump on there and answer questions with me. And so let's get started with this week's discussion. I noticed, one of the things I like to do is check out Aunt Minnie, AuntMinnie.com. That is a place where it's really kind of the Drudge Report, if you will, on radiology, everything radiology. And 2 things that stood out to me right off the bat is that breast cancer has surpassed lung cancer as the leading diagnosed cancer. And I'll tell you why this is significant here when I tie in a second article on here as well. But let me just read you a little bit of this. The title is Breast Cancer Surpasses Lung Cancer as Most Common Worldwide. Breast cancer in women has surpassed lung cancer as the most commonly diagnosed type of cancer worldwide, according to a new report published February 4th in CA, a cancer journal for clinicians. The numbers highlight the importance of early detection, which is where we come in as radiographers, mammographers, biopsiers. The report, called Global Cancer Statistics 2020, was written by the American Cancer Society and the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and used data from the latter's Global Cancer Observatory, GloboCan. The organizations found that there were 19.3 million new cancer cases in 2020. Of these, 2.3 million, or 11.7%, were female breast cancer. And the incident rate of cancers tied to socioeconomic factors, noted the team led by Hyuna Sung, PhD, principal scientist at the ACS, with women in transitioning countries, or for example, those shifting from essentially planned economy to a free market structure. who were experiencing increases in incidence compared with their already transitioned counterparts. Overall, the burden of cancer incidence and mortality is rapidly growing worldwide. This reflects both aging and growth of the population, as well as changes in the prevalence and distribution of the main risk factors for cancer, several of which are associated with socioeconomic development. So you can read the rest of that article for yourself, and here what we'll do is we'll grab that and chunk that down in the comment section for you. Hey, Darnell, welcome aboard, bro. So we're talking about breast cancer being the number one most common worldwide cancer now. If you look a little deeper, there's another article titled Outdoor Work Linked to Lower Risk of Breast Cancer. Working outdoors may come with the benefit of a lower risk of breast cancer, according to a study published on February 1st in Occupational and Environmental Medicine. Researchers found working outdoors for decades was tied to a lower breast cancer risk for women ages 50 and older. And so I tie these two together because what have we seen in the past year, right? And I'll link that article for those of you that want to read it here in the comment section. What have we seen in the past year in our society? We've seen quarantining. We've seen restrictions letting us go out and do things. We've seen segregation to a certain effect, a certain degree. We've been told to stay home, not go out, keep our social distance. And lo and behold, we saw an increase in the rate of cancer. What a coincidence. Here's an article saying get outside and get in the sun and get some occupational ultraviolet radiation exposure, and they found that it correlates with lower breast cancer risk. So get outside. If they're telling you to stay indoors or telling you to social distance, I'm going to say don't stay indoors. You can social distance outside. The world's big enough for all of us. Go do something with your family. Go hike a canyon, walk your neighborhood, go do something outside, get some sun, get out of the house, and reduce your chances of cancer. At least according to this study, reduces the risk of breast cancer. So I encourage you always to go check out what's going on over at Aunt Minnie, see what the latest and greatest is, but it by no means is the end-all be-all of everything radiology. There are certainly lots of different magazines. If you've been in the field long enough, you know that there's, 12 to 15 magazines that I get monthly from different organizations. ITN, of course, puts out that great big long one that I can't fit in any one of my magazine racks. But nonetheless, it's all good information. That's one of the things, at some point we'll do a series on what makes a good tech, right? What makes a good technologist. And I believe one of those criteria is staying on top of the current issues in the market. You can't just simply go to work every day and just do your job, because you'll fall behind on the latest technology. And then when it does come knocking on your door and they start setting up the training, you'll be starting from scratch and won't know anything about it. Where if you do a little research and do a little reading and do a little studying, you'll see that there's things coming your way. Like you could have seen this movement for stop shielding a year and a half ago. If you were a follower of my blog and you were watching my channel, you'll see that as soon as that came out in some of the smaller articles, I interviewed Patricia Marsh, Dr. Patricia Marsh, who was the leading physicist at the AAPM that started that movement with her research. And she got the AACR on board. And with those two, they came out and started saying, we really don't need to be shielding our patients anymore. And of course, you saw the big uproar and what that cost with everybody in our industry. And on the forums, we started discussing it. And you had technologists saying things like, I'm never going to stop shielding my patients. That's what I was taught to do. And it's the right thing to do. And I'm all about protecting my patient. And what you have to be careful of is, yes, we're here to protect the patient, but we're also in a highly evolving scientific field, and you've got to stay on top of the current topics. And what was shown was sometimes the patients were getting more dose if we shielded them. And so you may think you're doing the right thing, but until you are learned and educated in the latest scientific articles and research, you may not know everything. I guess that's the real takeaway there is, just make sure you realize we don't know everything. And we may have gone to the best schools or had the best teachers, or we may be working at the Mayo Clinic, or we may be working somewhere that is the top in the field, but that still doesn't mean we know everything. So always be willing to learn more. I miss these live video times on break at work. Well, the good news, Sarah, is these are recorded, right? You can always come back and catch it later. I try to figure out what the best time is to do these. And during the week, we're all just so busy. I've played with the idea of doing a little 20-minute every morning, Monday through Friday, that you can maybe listen to on the way to work or something. But everybody's schedules are just so different and things change so frequently. I felt like the weekend was the best time to do these because, yeah, we have weekend techs, right, that work on the weekends, but I can sit down usually on a Saturday or a Sunday and knock out an hour of Q&A, and you're always welcome to email me questions and put them on the Facebook group or put them here on the YouTube channel and ask questions. I typically answer them within an hour or two, but if it's a good topic, then I can bring it to this Q&A live and expand on it, or sometimes I do that anyway because it's a topic that deserves further explanation. So, or that I can really expand on the answering some questions on the YouTube comments area gets kind of difficult because they require a lot of, in my opinion, explanation. Like somebody came to our Facebook group, I think it was this morning. Let me pop over there real quick. Somebody came on and said, tell me the pros and cons of radiology. And I said, here it is, Alicia, 15 hours ago. What are the pros and cons of radiology? Well, let's whittle that down a little bit because that's a pretty big topic. And that's exactly what I said. Can you maybe pick a modality that you're interested in that we could answer? Because there's a lot that could be said about the entire department of radiology. So feel free to post your comments and questions in the sidebar there. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up, get us some recognition with YouTube in general. And I'm going to start going through the Facebook group and looking at some of the most recent questions. I typically answer them same day, sometimes next day. And we do have the Clubhouse live going if you have a Clubhouse account. Here's Laura 5 hours ago. I have a stepson who is interested in going to school for Xray. He can go to the community college to get a 2-year degree and will probably do that. I do see a trade school has a program for a medical assistant limited scope. Can anyone tell me the difference in school and pay for this? Is the limited scope even worth looking into? So if there's one thing I can get across in these groups, it's check the search history of the group, because this question has come up dozens of times and we've already answered it dozens of times. And I get that maybe where these questions differ a little bit is somebody will say, I want to hear what your opinion is. People right now, people in the field right now, what do you think? Where I'm real quick to go find an article that I've written about this already, just post the article. And that article may be dated by a year. I've been blogging these answers. I started answering these questions on my blog almost 2 years ago. It was March 2 years ago that I started. So I jump into these kind of questions and I'll send them a link to the article that'll completely explain the whole thing. But sometimes they're looking for, people's personal insights. They may not just want mine. They may want to hear what other people have to say about it as well. And that's fine. And that's why I leave these questions up there. This particular question is 5 hours old and it's already reached 798 people and 20 people have commented. So at this point, we've built a community that's large enough that I don't necessarily have to dive in on every single question and answer it, because a lot of other people are. If I read through and I see that maybe there's an aspect that's been missed, or maybe a lot of these comments are coming from techs and I can give the perspective of an admin in there, I'll do that. Or if I feel like we've gotten plenty of great answers, I may just do a follow-up and say, did you get the answer you were looking for? So if you have questions, you're welcome to come to the Facebook group. I linked to it in the beginning, I believe. I'll do it again just in case. But this is our Facebook group. If you want to join, I'll let anybody in there that's a tech or an admin or looking to get into the field of radiology There are some other groups on Facebook that are worth joining, but not very many that allow people in from outside the field. My buddy Chris Cotting has a group called the Radiology Technologist Life, and it's for techs. And you might get in there as a non-tech because he's not, super stringent, but it's really built more for techs, and it's a place for them to ask each other questions. And if you get in there and start asking questions, they'll say, hey, why are you asking such an obvious question? You must not be a tech, and you might get removed. Generally, if you're being cool, he doesn't mind you lurking and checking things out. But his blog is really, if you want to see what the techs are talking about and what the techs are doing and what they're working on, that is a great place to go. There are, let's see, there's another one, Radiology Tips and Pathology. I'll link to that one here. I'm a big fan of their group. They do a great job moderating. It's really for techs only. If you're a tech and you want to see what's going on in that group, go join it. But for the most part, I typically just talk about what's going on in my group. And so a couple comments. Sarah's at work, going to try to catch what we're doing when she can. My daughter Victoria is out there. I just watched them at work, have it on in the background. So, my kids, I have 6, me and mom grow up in Xray and go through the radiology field. It has taken care of my family for, going on 20 years. And it's something we believe highly in and have put a lot of our time into. Lisa, my wife, sometimes she jumps on these with me. You'll see her on the banner of the Facebook group. We've done these lives together. She's in Xray Tech going on probably 10 years. And she does more of an outpatient basis. She was in an ortho clinic for a while, at a doctor's kind of a complex of multiple doctors' offices. So she's more of a walkie-talkie. She did an interesting mandible the other day that had part in there with a metal brace, and so that got me to looking things up because I haven't seen one of those. Fascinating case study. But she has the perspective outside of trauma and outside of OR, where I was in traumas and in the OR, did C-arms and O-arms, and worked my way through X-ray, CT, ultrasound, and MRI. About the only thing, and I did some IR too, but the only thing I didn't do was nuclear medicine. But anyway, we got Sarah. I was talking about Victoria. She ended up going the RN route. She's a CNA going LPN. And so it's fun watching her learn medicine from that perspective because I appreciate the RN role. And I had thought about going to RN after X-ray school, contemplated what kind of a combination that would make if you had both radiology and nursing together. But Sarah said, headed back to work, a question to look at later. Best way to start off. I have not started a program yet. My education with cross-modality training goal. Bring more to my small town health center. Heading back to work, but question to look at later. Best way to start off. I have not started a program yet. My education with cross-modality training. Well, I'm not sure if you're asking about how to get into cross-modality. Of course, I have articles on how to get cross-trained and all that stuff. But my overall look on cross-modality is the more valuable you are, the more educated you are, the more valuable you are to your employer, with the caveat that they can always let you go at any time, no matter how valuable you are, because you have ignorant administrators out there that don't understand what we do. We kind of worked ourselves a little bit into a corner because we, as technologists, always usually want to learn more. There's some that are fine staying in X-ray, and that's cool too. But a lot of us want to learn more and more and move around and see different things. And these administrators become comfortable with us being multimodality techs, and they don't realize that back in the day you didn't have that. Back in the day, every department was separate and had its own separate licensed technologist. Back in the day, even when I started, your CT tech stayed in CT, and they very rarely ever even spoke to each other. X-ray and CT. X-ray did their thing, CT did their thing. You might help transfer a patient over, if they went from X-ray to CT, you might take them over there, but you didn't have multimodality technologists like you do today. And so they're starting to expect it. And you'll see that on the group. If you go on the Facebook group, you'll see discussions where I think Ann on there has an issue. She's in an outpatient clinic imaging center where there's usually 5 techs to do everything, and somebody left. And the boss is saying, well, I'll replace that person when I find a person that does all the modalities. And they haven't been able to find that person because that's rare. And it's because these guys continue to learn and continue to provide. Now this employer expects every technologist they meet to be able to do like 4 modalities or 3 modalities. And that's not the case. So if you want to learn a different modality, I have lots of methods on how to do that on my blog, theradiologytechnologist.com. And it's just a matter of sometimes of being in the right place at the right time. Other times it's about being persistent and kind of nudging your way in there and being willing to help out when they need help, transferring or lifting help or whatever. So back to the Facebook group. The difference, so that initial question, I don't mess around with limited scope at all. If you look at limited scope jobs across the board, you'll find that eventually that it's really used as a stepping stone to get to the, I can't call it the normal level, but to get to the place that they originally wanted to be in the first place. A lot of people take these shortcuts because exactly that, it's a shortcut. It's a shorter program, it costs less, it's easier to get into. But if you're going to end up going the full route anyway, then you just wasted time and money learning something that, I mean, the only benefit to it really is it teaches you some of what you're going to learn in the next program, but you're going to learn it in the next program anyway. Why take a year or whatever to learn how to be a partial Xray tech when you can go to the regular school, learn everything you need to know, get fully licensed, and just do it right the first time? Why mess around with a lesser degree unless it's required? A CNA is required in a lot of programs to move into RN. There's a lot of RN programs that require you to do that first, like a prerequisite. That's understandable. It starts to teach you the basics of lifting mechanics for patients and patient care and transportation, different things like that. You can't say the same thing about a limited license Xray tech. And last time I checked, because I wrote an article on these on my blog, if you do a search there, I believe it was only created for states that did not require licensure. So let's say a place like Idaho that does not require an ART license to practice radiography. You could go to a program that does limited license and learn enough to get by and have some level of competence to shoot X-rays so an employer could hire you, because you can say, I do X-rays, but part of the caveat of the limited is you cannot X-ray the whole body. So you could not offer your employee the ability to X-ray everything. And then on top of that, most employers require a full license. So even though in Idaho, which is where I live, even though Idaho does not have a state license, the facilities, the major facilities, the major hospitals, whether they're critical access 20-bed hospitals or the full-on 250-bed hospitals, they all require licensure to be hired. So the only place in Idaho that you can shoot X-rays would be a small little mom and pop hospital or doctor's office, or maybe an outpatient imaging center that's kind of skirting the best practice of taking X-rays. So I would tell Laura, don't bother sending your son to a partial degree, send him to the full degree and go all in and don't go half in. And again, there's 20 comments from everybody pretty much saying the same thing. So we'll skip to the next one. Is anyone a traveling radiology tech? I've looked into it and thought about it, but wanted to hear any personal experiences. So again, I have multiple articles on being a traveling tech. I interviewed a guy that owns a traveling staffing agency, Dale Hannigan, and he tells you what it's like to be a traveler, what you can get paid, why there are different payment structures, what you can expect. So the thing about being a traveler is The place that's hiring you is expecting you just to hit the ground running with very little training. That's what they think is going to happen. But again, they're outside of the world of radiology, so they don't understand that we have 15 different manufacturers of X-ray machines. So you may be an expert on a GE or a Siemens or a Philips, but you still have Carestream and 100 other different types of X-ray machines. So you can't necessarily walk in and just automatically know everything. Now, the more seasoned you are as a tech, the more you're going to know. And so that will help you do the job easier. But generally, and this is debatable, generally you can't become a traveler right out of school because you need to be able to hit the ground running and kind of know a little bit what you're doing. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get the job right out of school. If you're one of those go-getters that's really good and really self-confidence, or even mastered the art of fake it until you make it, if you can convince everybody that you know what you're doing, take a travel job because they're awesome. You get paid more for doing a travel job. You can pick the length of your contract. So if there's one in Hawaii or New York or Washington, D.C., you can pick and choose. Do I want a 3-week contract or a 3-month contract or a 12-month contract? And when it's all done, you pack up and you go somewhere else. But that travel agency will pay a high wage. It'll pay your room and board. It'll pay you a daily stipend. Oh, not only are you getting paid, but if you can find a way to live cheaper than what the stipend is for rent, like let's say they give you $500 a month for rent, and you can find an Airbnb for $300 a month or whatever, just giving examples, you can actually make, and if they give you $40 a day for meals, which is common, but you can eat for $20 a day, you put another $20 in your pocket. So I knew a guy a long time ago that bought an RV, and he would travel because most of our hospitals are set up for RV parking for extended family that comes in and parks their trailer at the hospital so that they can visit their family and stay close. This was an echo tech who did echo sonography, made very, very good money, especially as a traveler. He would drive his RV, park it in the parking lot, plug into the electricity of the hospital, live right there in the parking lot in his own RV. And so the money he got for his daily living stipend, that would be rent for an apartment, paid his RV payment. And then he would get $40 a day for food, but he could eat in the hospital for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for less than $20 because he got employee discount. So this guy, he's one of the first people I met that was a traveler that really got me excited about the idea of what could be made as a traveler. And that's what led me to talk to my wife about what if you became a tech like me when we're older and our kids are grown and gone, we could take travel deals and travel around together, me as a sonographer and you in X-ray or whatever modality I wanted to do. And that's kind of where we got started. So that's a great option of one of the things you can do as a traveling tech. Of course, this person, Anna Maria, is asking the different experiences. You can end up in a place where they're all haters and they're all jerks and they're all, difficult to work with. And maybe that's why that job is open. Maybe that's why they're putting a traveler there because they can't find anybody to come work with those jack wagons that work in that clinic. So you never know what you're going to do. I ran out and did a gig for, was it a week or 2 weeks? In Wyoming at a little clinic and loved it. The people there were awesome. The machine was a little bit antiquated. I had to kind of figure out how to use the ultrasound machine, but I don't think I did more than 3 or 4 patients a day. They said, look, if you want to go back to your hotel and hang out, we'll call you when you get a patient. It was awesome. It paid really well. Stayed in a really nice hotel. So traveling can be really great. You just have to be willing to, you have to be able to put up with people that say, well, here, this is how we do it. And we don't know what you're used to, but this is how we do it. And, you're just going to have to show that you know what you're doing and you get along with people and you take care of your patients. And it can be a great gig. So, Victoria said, what age do you need to start getting mammos? Well, it's under discussion. It used to be 50, then 40, now back to 50. There's a big debate going on between different agencies on when you should. If you talk to the radiologists, most radiologists will say you need it every year, starting somewhere between the age of 40 and 50. But some of the big agencies came out and said, no, you only need it every 2 years. Well, every year is too much. And I think that was because they didn't want to pay for it. They didn't want to pay for the mammographies, which is crap. And that's what you see government doing all the time is cutting back on care so that they can save money. Technically you can get one whenever you want. If you're self-examining and you feel a lump or you have a family history or you just have a feeling, that you need to get checked, you can go in and mammographies are self-referral. You don't need to see a doctor to get in to see one. You just go to the imaging center and say, or you call them and say, I'd like to schedule a mammogram, and ask them what the cost is out of pocket. If you have insurance, tell them what insurance you have, get it scheduled, and go get the mammogram. I recommend a 3D mammogram, 3D tomo versus the old school 2D, because it cuts down on the number of false positives. And if you have dense breast tissue, it cuts down on the callbacks for those. For a long time with 2D breast mammo, if you had really dense, thick tissue, they would do your mammogram, turn it over to the radiologist. He'd squint at it and say, it's really hard to tell. This person has really dense tissue. Why don't we call them back and do it again just in case? Or maybe follow up with ultrasound. And of course, that freaks a lot of people out. So 3D tomo came along, which gets a lot better image. Takes a lot more space on your PAC system because it's like a bunch of cine loops. But 3D tomo does cost you a little bit more, but it's not too bad. And they can combine that with the old 2D to get an even better look. So check out the 3D memo. And so don't forget to hit the like button on there if you can remember. The next question, that's the pros and cons of radiology. So I'm going to wait and see if that gets narrowed down. I linked to my article, the seven real dangers of being a rad tech. I wrote that article over a year ago. And it was just my personal insight. For example, we get exposed to airborne and bloodborne pathogens all the time in the field of radiology, whether it's during the exam or you have to go to the ICU and do your morning portables and that patient's oozing stuff out of everywhere, or you're in the ER shooting a trauma patient and they're flailing about or whatever. You have constant exposure. You always want to wear your mask and your PPE and things like that. Then number two, I put down a potential for needle sticks. I've been stuck with a needle. I was doing an IR procedure one time and I drew up a solution. It was a clean needle, but I was holding a bottle and I was drawing up a solution. And when I pulled the needle out of the bottle, the pressure released and it kind of squirted a little bit out of the needle and it hit another tech. And so we had to, do a little write-up for that, but it was a clean needle, so no real measures had to be taken. But it was a good example of, holding a bottle and withdrawing the needle away from anybody else, do it towards the wall or whatever. But I was also, it was when I was a phlebotomist, but putting a needle into somebody's arm with a butterfly needle, they jumped when I stuck them, which made me, as I'm holding the skin taut and putting the needle in, when they jumped, I stuck my finger. And so I had to have a hepatitis B shot and get followed up for that. But needle sticks are a common thing in radiology. And then there's my number three is the emotional trauma that we can go through, because we'll see horrible accidents. We'll see kids affected and different things that we wish we hadn't seen. And so that is always a concern. And you need to make sure you can decompress somehow with somebody and talk about things if they start to bother you. And then number four, being physically attacked by the drunk patients or the drugged patients. If you work with an ER at your facility, you have a high risk of getting punched or kicked or spit at. Usually the first time that patient spits, they'll throw and they even come in off the ambulance with the net on their face to catch the spit if they're already doing it in the ambulance. But those are things that can happen. I've never had anybody attempt to punch me, but I've had people threaten to punch me. And I also have another article on my blog, and I share it quite frequently, that tells techs and students that we're not there to put up with crap from patients. We're there to do our job, which does not include getting cussed at, spit at, or threatened. And if you do get any of those things, you go back to that ordering physician and you say, I am refusing to provide service to that patient because of, they spit at me, they were swearing at me, they were swinging at me, they threatened me. If you want to sedate that patient or send security over with me, I will go back to that patient, but I am not putting myself in harm's way because of their altered mental status or whatever it is. Number five, long-term physical injury from standard daily job duties. I just posted an image on our Facebook group from, Carrie, I saw your comment. I'll get to you in just a second. I'm just kind of on a roll. Physical long-term, my stepdad, who got an Xray score up before me, he has been full-time OR tech for 20 years. So he's the C-arm guy. He gets along really well with those surgeons, which we all know how hard that is. But because he's really good at golf, they like him. He actually is so into golf, he makes his own golf clubs and golf heads. I mean, actually molds the golf heads. So the surgeons love him, and they always had recommended him. So he just got a permanent spot in the OR. But he had to have carpal tunnel because the constant moving of the C-arm and the wiggle waggle and everything you have to do, he's doing a lot of that motion, and had to do carpal tunnel. And then when I posted that and shared that on the Facebook group, somebody else posted their scar where they got it done as well. So we have a lot of back injuries in radiology. We have shoulder injuries, wrist injuries. There's a lot of education done on whether you should push or pull equipment, push or pull beds. I always get that part confused. I say let the transporter do it. But you just have to remember, we are always highly encouraged to ask for lifting help. Don't ever try and move a patient on your own or lift a patient, even boost a patient. There's always nurses around or somebody else that can help you with that patient. The only time you're truly caught off guard is when you're standing a patient up to do a chest x-ray and they start to fall because of one reason or another. Your natural reaction is to try and catch that patient, and man, you can throw it back out quicker than anything that way. It's actually taught the proper way, so let them fall against you and let them slide down your leg all the way to the floor. Don't try and catch them and hold them up, because you'll pull that back out and then you're out of work, and then the boss is mad because they got to file a report and it goes on their numbers that they had a workplace injury and he's in trouble or she's in trouble. Why didn't you educate your people on how to let them slide down to the floor? So just do your part to learn proper ergonomics and how to take care of yourself and patients. There's stretching you should do. There's not a good radiography stretching chart, but sonographers usually have one in their department, and you can look that up online too. But they're taught how to stretch and how to do different things that keep their shoulders, elbows, and wrists limber, because that's where, as a sonographer, if you're using your right hand, you got to reach over that patient and get up under that left kidney, and you got to twist your probe and apply pressure, and so we get it really bad in the wrist. So there's a lot of things that you can do, bands you can use to stretch. Do your part to stay physically fit. Number 6, there's excessive radiation exposure. And I specifically wrote from equipment not up to standard, because if we're following ARA and wearing our dosimeter badges, we know how much radiation we're getting. What I was thinking of when I wrote that a year ago was, I worked in a CT room back in Mesa, Arizona, a long time ago. And the physicist came around putting dosimeters everywhere, kind of checking stuff. And he taped one to that glass that's right in front of us at our console. So, out there's the CT tube. We're back behind the glass at our console doing our thing, talking to our patient, pushing the space bar. And that glass was supposed to be somewhat radio opaque, where it was a lead glass. And when he got the reading back, it was actually not a leaded glass. And this was a 50-plus-year-old hospital. So this was an old hospital, maybe even 75 years. And what we learned that day was that glass was put in with standard glass. So it was not blocking radiation. So luckily, we were over 6 feet away from the gantry, but that taught me never take anything for granted. Always check things. So you can always grab a blank dosimeter or a student dosimeter or something. If you're getting a student dosimeter and that student's no longer there, and that's a zero read dosimeter badge, tape that somewhere and then turn it in. Let your boss know, I'm running a little experiment. I'm going to tape this to the door of the CT room, or I'm going to tape this to the monitor at my desk, or whatever, and let it go for a month or however long you check yours. It could be quarterly, and turn it in and see what it says. And you may get caught off guard and find that you're where you thought you were protected, you are not. Lastly, patients are being sued by patients for medical malpractice or substandard care. So it is perfectly normal and within your ability to buy your own malpractice. Typically, there is something that will cover you at your work if it happens, but you can also buy your own medical malpractice. I was asked to be a expert consultant in the world of radiology for a case in another state. We'll just say another state, where a seizure patient came into the ER, and they were worked up in the ER and sent for a CAT scan. It was all documented. This was a seizure patient, and they put him on the CAT scan table, and there was only one CT tech, at least in this particular case. And they put him on the table and left the room to do the scan. And at some point, the patient got dizzy and sat up, perhaps after the scan, sat up and fell off the table. And so not only did they fall off the table because the straps weren't on, but when they fell off, they literally broke their neck when they hit the ground. So they fractured their cervical vertebrae. So now there's a whole litany of problems for this patient because they were not strapped in and left alone when it was known that they were a seizure patient. So there's a lawsuit against the hospital. There's a lawsuit against the technologist. So there's a case where could it have been prevented? Yeah. But if you have extra malpractice on yourself, you don't have to worry about losing your house or whatever money you have in the bank because of an error like that. So look into medical malpractice for healthcare workers. Carrie, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience. I'm hoping to join a radiology technologist program at SLCC. I have my admission interview in 2 weeks. School interview tips welcome. Yeah, listening, just scan the blog post, useful and interesting. So I have lots of articles on interviews. I did on this YouTube channel. If you go back to the beginning, I did a reverse engineer of the interview questions. I go over probably, 20 questions, and I explain what we're looking for when we ask the questions. I explain what we're looking for in the answers and what we like to hear and why. So I'll explain why a particular question gets asked and the different criteria that question is attempting to uncover, if you will, and what some good replies are. I've also got examples. I had a guy, we nicknamed him Jackrabbit Joe, who had a master plan of how to get a job once he graduated, and that included reaching out to the hospital where he wanted to get his job, staying in contact with them every semester and reporting his grades, coming up to visit even though it was 3 hours away to introduce himself. He came for one of our employee parties and hung out. I think he came to a Christmas party. And by the time he graduated, everybody knew him and liked him, and he got the first available job. I think in that article about Jackrabbit Joe, I talk about interview questions. But if you go to the blog and just type the word interview or school or something related to what you're asking about, there's lots of articles there. Do you think school admission questions are similar as an employment interview with less technical questions? So similar, yes. They will talk about you and how you handle stress. Well, what a school should be asking you, and I have these questions in there if you look, is they want to know if you've looked into the field of radiography. The worst thing is if they say, what do you know about radiology? And you say that you take x-rays. They want to know that you should be able to speak to fluoro, and that Xray techs are in the OR and they're in the ER and they're in the ICU doing portables. Talk about doing portable exams and exams in the exam room. Talk about traumas. Talk about walkie-talkie patients that just come in for average stuff. There's a lot of different aspects to radiography that the average person doesn't understand, and it's ironic that radiography pays the least out of all the modalities because they do the most, really. You're all over the hospital. You're doing portables. You're doing exam rooms. You're doing fluoroscopy exams. You're seeing outpatients, inpatients, critical patients, babies, neonatals, senior citizens. I mean, you cover the entire gamut of the spectrum. So look on my blog for the interview questions. They're all in there. And I have an article about how to research your school. You'll want to know who's going to be in your interview. You'll want to know some good questions for you to ask is, what's your graduation rate? What's your ARRT national exam pass rate? Do you help your graduates find jobs? That's very important. Let's see. For school admissions, check the articles and then get back to me if you still have questions. And we can even do some sample interviews if you want to, like in a Zoom meeting or something like that. I've done that before too. I'll ask you questions and put some pressure on you, and you answer, and I'll tell you what's good and bad about your answers. I don't mind doing that at all. So checking out your school. Oh, so your clinicals. You want to know what your options are for your clinicals. I've talked about this a lot lately, because your clinicals are a job interview for where you get your job. If you do your clinicals right, you should be able to get a job at that hospital. Your clinicals are a 9-month or a 2-year job interview, really. And so find out ahead of time where your clinical rotations are. Some schools let you pick, some schools don't. Some schools don't have many options of where to put you. So everybody gets the same clinical rotation. But you want to know where that is. You want to find out a little bit about that rotation. For example, if your school only has the option to put you at a local outpatient imaging center, you're not going to get any OR, which means you're not going to get any C-arm. So you'll want to try and find out where is a hospital that I can go to get into the OR, to get into the ICU, to get into an emergency room to see the traumas. Because you want to balance between outpatient imaging, but you kind of get that in a general X-ray department because they get outpatient imaging. But a hospital will also give you all that other stuff. So you want to make sure. I think a great balance is a level 1 trauma and a critical access hospital. If you can get both of those, you can get everything, even if you don't get an outpatient imaging center. The only thing different about an outpatient imaging center is you're going to get crushed with volumes because they're a turn and burn. An outpatient imaging centers just want to image as many people a day as possible, where the hospital, if managed properly and gives proper patient care, does what it needs to do to give proper patient care by means of taking your time and doing it right the first time. Where the outpatient imaging centers, you just do a lot of the same stuff over and over. You just go as fast as you can. So try to get a level 1 trauma and a critical access hospital, and that'll get you a little bit of both. Glaucus. What software do you use for viewing images? Well, there's tons. I like Epic was my most recent. Cerner. Who's those guys in Salt Lake City? Was it? I can see the colors. And it was my favorite too. I mean, Epic's really good, but I can't think of it right now, but there's tons of different software for looking at images. They have to be it has to be able to read DICOM images. That's the big thing with radiology, and software that comes along and can manipulate DICOM images into other formats like JPEGs and other things. It's going to be worth its weight in gold someday. You're welcome for the Q&A. Carrie, luckily I was able to go in for 8 hours of shadowing. Wow, good for you. That's another great thing to put down on your application when you go in to apply. In that shadowing, hopefully you got to ask the techs in different modalities what they liked about the job and what they didn't like, and you got to see how it all worked, because you tell your recruiters or your interviewers what you saw and what you liked and didn't like. That lets them know you've done a deep dive on what happens in radiology, and that puts you above all the people that don't know. And there's people that aren't being allowed to do shadowing because of COVID or because of uptight administrators who are worried about HIPAA. You should be able to sign a HIPAA release form that allows you in there to do a shadowing, but that's up to the clinic. What else? I may message you to your clinicals. They sent me a form already to put in my first 8 choices. Yeah, so we need to talk about your 8 choices. We can talk offline about that if you want, Carrie. But like I said, try to pick first of all, look at where you want to work. Try to stick with where you want to work in the future. But you also want to mix between a level 1 trauma and a critical access hospital. Critical access hospitals are nice because if you can most likely get multimodality trained there on the job. So you can learn X-ray and CT and maybe MRI or ultrasound or something, because they need everybody to do everything at those little locations. At the bigger hospitals, they have people separately doing all that stuff, but you get a lot more variety and you get to see a lot of different things at the bigger hospital. So when it comes to being a student, you want to try and get both 3D or 3D viewer, possibly software. Yeah, no, I bet if I do a Google on PACS.
Can I pop in and say something?
Salt Lake City. Yep, go ahead. This is my wife, Lisa. She's an Xray Tech too.
So talking about clinical sites, my recommendation would be as well. So here, you don't have to have a license to start. We require that you have it. I think it's usually within the first year or whatever, but we allow our students to come on as like flex techs in their after their second rotation. So those kids, well, not necessarily kids, but those students that are in their second rotation at our hospital, 9 out of 10 times are the ones that get those PRN spots. So I think it's all about timing. So for our students, if they want to work at our hospital, my recommendation to them is get our clinical site for your second rotation, because you guys have already had one rotation. So when you come into us, you're a little bit more knowledgeable. And then when we hire, you're the last ones that we have just seen. So those students are more likely to be hired because we were the last ones they saw, or they were the last ones we saw.
You remember that? It was the last time I saw was at Mesa Jones, but that PAC system that we see it when we drive down through Salt Lake City. It's on the west side. They're based out of Salt Lake. Do you remember what they have that PAC? What are some PAC systems that you remember?
PACs? I don't
Like
know.
Epic, and
Well,
like you're on Epic now. Before that, it was, I think, McKesson.
Yeah.
But there's
That's all
Carestream does it. Agfa has. I mean, almost every equipment vendor has their own PAC system. Somebody was just asking what PACs. I can't remember that one out of Salt Lake City, and I tried Googling and it's still not showing up. But anyway, that was Carrie or Glaucus, I think, was asking what software you used to view images. So the local hospital here just switched to Epic. There's a lot of systems are moving to the Epic platform because of the data mining that it does.
But I view all my stuff on PACs. Our radiologists view it on PACs.
Yeah, but that's just the name of the pixel archival computer system. There has to be a brand on it. So there's some open source PACs software out there too that you can download for free and play around with. But all the main brand, Carestream, Fuji, GE, they all have their own PAC systems. McKesson's very popular. So I'm not sure why you're asking, but there's lots of software you can view images on. I'm not a kid. I'm 43. Carrie says she's 45, so she's right behind you there, kid, or right ahead of you. I think we just say that because we have 6 kids we're always trying to wrangle of our own. So we're at the 52-minute mark. I went over a couple of questions off the Facebook group. I encourage everybody to join on there and ask your questions.
Did you just tell everybody how old I was?
I sure did, Grandma.
Jeez, I ain't the grandma yet.
Here's another good question that I see on the Facebook group a lot. And that's people saying, hey, I'm moving to, this person says, I'm moving to a certain place in Texas. Can anybody tell me what the pay is there? And you'll get 10 people that'll say, yeah, I work there and I make 26 an hour. I work here and I'm whatever an hour. And I work in a clinic. I work in a hospital. You didn't used to have that availability in the past to find out proactively what you could make in another state. This particular question, though, says anyone in East Bay, California, went to Guernick Academy for Xray. So they're reaching out to 9 comments there, 9 people saying, yeah, I went there. What do you need? So this group, even though I'm not a super big fan of Facebook because of their manipulations, this group has become a great community where people in the radiography field can come together and ask questions and get honest answers from peers, not just that's what I hated was the websites out there were just crap. They were link farms that would post whatever they could to get you to their site from a Google search so that they could make money off advertisements. And they called it technicians, and they said it was a 6-week program to become an Xray Tech, and just all kinds of stupid information. So I built my blog, I built this channel, and we're going to start getting the right information out there because I want to make sure the next generation has the proper information and is properly educated. Who's this? Oh, so there's a doctor, a radiologist. This is new. A radiologist who wrote a book about seeing within the human body and the human aspect side of that, and how his job has allowed him to see people differently and have a relationship with his patients that he never thought possible. And he's got it on here 3 hours ago. He linked to a book called Looking Within. His name is Dr. Cullen Ruff. And the book is called Looking Within, Understanding Ourselves Through Human Imaging. And he was the #1 seller for a little bit. It's very unique. Not many people writing. IT's the only one I know writing about that. And I recommend that for those of you who are radiology nerds like me and love everything radiology. Here's Tina. I'm currently repetitioning to get into radiography core classes. Not sure if many programs are like this, but we're required to write an essay with our application. It goes something like, describe the steps I've taken to research or gain experience related to the field of radiography. So Carrie, there you go. Here's a place that makes you write an essay on what you've learned while researching the field. Because let's face it, there's a lot of people that want to get into radiology, and I don't know about where you're from, but sometimes you can have 100 applicants for a class that accepts 12. So they want to see people that are interested and have looked into it and have a reason for being there, and not just because they heard it makes good money or they heard it has good future job possibilities. And then the next post is I encourage staffing agencies to post in our group to help you guys find jobs. And this job really caught my attention because it's $61 an hour for a CT tech, $61 an hour, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. And you can contact them for more information. If you're thinking about being a traveler, I'm pretty sure this is a travel gig, but you'd have to contact them or join the group and look at it. Kirk Stegmeyer posted it. They're looking for 2 techs, 2 certified rad tech opportunities in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. $61 an hour. It's a 13-week. So yeah, it's traveler. 13-week contract needed ASAP. You want to go have some fun and make some fat cash, and get this. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's 2 16s on the weekend, which if you've never heard of that, that made 16-hour shifts. I did that for a while. Loved it. You just get some sleep in between those 2 16s. But you do an 8 on Friday and 2 16s Saturday and Sunday. You got your full 40 in 3 days, 4 days to play, and you made $61 an hour, man. That is a gig of a lifetime right there. Go play for 13 weeks. So Fish Potato jumped on. If you're on a waiting list for a year, what would you recommend doing while waiting? You could take some prereqs maybe that would, they used to call them, you could comp out of the class. There was a test you could take with the school. And if you passed that test, you wouldn't have to take the class. You basically proved proficiency. So ask that radiography program, CLEP, they called it CLEPing out of the test, because there were CLEP exam books you could study. They were like a boiled down version of the class. You study it, learn it, go take the CLEP exam and CLEP out of the check with the school and ask if you're allowed to test out. And if you are, then take those courses before you get in. And then right before you start the exam, take those CLEP tests, and you won't have to take them during your program. The other thing you can do is pick up a gig. If you want a job, pick up a job as a transporter or something in the hospital that starts to get you familiar with the hospital layout. A transporter is a great job while you're waiting to get into X-ray school, or even during X-ray school, because you get to learn what all the different departments do. You get to take patients to radiology and drop them off in the CT, and they'll let you sit there and watch if you have time, or sit and watch an MRI. You can learn a lot about the department. I see a lot of people that'll say, well, I want to start learning to get ahead. And that's really tough to do because you don't know what exactly your teachers are going to teach you. But I have sample tests on my blog. In fact, I'll go grab that for you, because a lot of things never change, right? The bones never change. You'll always have a radius and ulna. They'll never rename the bone like they rename a monument or rename a school after a different president or whatever. A lot of things don't change. So you could start to learn about radiobiology or about anatomy or about medical terminology. Those are all things that won't change. So go to this link. I'll share it in the comments section here. And you could start learning radiographic pathology, radiographic biology, radiographic physics, radiation safety. The medical law and ethics never change on what you can do with a patient. Patient positioning isn't going to change. The way you shoot a lateral forearm is not going to change. Nobody's going to come up with a better way to shoot a lateral forearm. So go to that link that I just gave you and start going through those quizzes. There's, I don't know, 50 different quizzes on there with the answers. You start learning that stuff now, and then when you get in the program, you'll already know it. So that's one thing. Also, even if it's just for money, what's a good response as to why you want to be in the program? Well, the common is, could you close that? The common is to help people. But you've really got to, if you've ever watched, what was that? It used to be my favorite medical movie with Matthew Modine, Gross Anatomy. In the very opening scenes, he's getting interviewed by the medical schools, and they say, "Tell me, Joe, why do you want to be a doctor?" And he says, "Well, I want to help people," and all those kinds of canned questions that everybody gives. And then finally, one administrator says, "Come on, Joe, why do you really want to be a doctor?" And he says, "I want to make lots of money." And it's funny because that's what we think. We're in it for the money, but we're also in it for a trade. You're in it for a skill. So even if it's just for money, what's a good response as to why you want to be in the program? Because you want to be, you like healthcare. Here's what I always said. I like to solve problems. And originally, early on in my college career, I thought that meant accounting, because I really like to do an accounting spreadsheet and try and find out where those pennies were missing. If my balances didn't match, then I got to go figure out, well, is it an accounts receivable or accounts payable? Did somebody give me an invoice that was mistyped? I like to solve problems. It kind of gives me a task to do. And when I solve the problem, I feel good. It's like a reward. Well, in healthcare, you have patients coming in daily that have a problem that need to be solved. And let's just take the emergency room, for example, Mr. Fish Potato. Somebody comes into the ER and says, "I have a stomach ache." Well, that ER doctor does a primary and secondary exam, meaning he checks their airway and everything first. That's your primary. And then he does a secondary where he palpates and he listens with his stethoscope. And he tries to see, is there anything that would help lead him towards a certain diagnosis. But he's almost always going to need two things: lab work and imaging. And so those are the two most important things that a doctor uses as a tool in their tool belt to solve the problem of what's wrong with the patient. So by joining the world of radiology, you become a part of the problem-solving process to find out what's wrong with the patient. So it depends on what modality you do, the effect to which you can give that doctor the answer. But the better you are at your job, the better you can help that doctor find the answer. So a good answer to that question is, I like to solve problems and help people. And one way I can do both is by getting into healthcare. And that is the difference between being a nurse and being an Xray Tech. A nurse doesn't necessarily solve the problem of what's wrong. A nurse provides care. A nurse is told what to do with the care plan. The doctor says, give this drug every 4 hours, change their wound dressing this often, check their vitals Q4, do their blood sugar Q6, and they follow this plan of care. A radiology person is given a patient told, image this part of them that is hurting or broken or I think is the problem. And you image that part of the body and you help solve the problem of what's wrong. That's where radiology comes in. We solve the problem of what's wrong with the patient and help the physician determine, hopefully, what the cause is. The human body is so complex, you cannot always find out what's wrong with them, but you can find alternating diagnoses that could lead to the cure or helping them ease the pain of whatever it is. So I have a panel interview soon where I need a response other than helping people. So thanks. It's for echosonography. So big fan of echo, love echosonography. Echo, what you can say is, it's funny, act like you know what you're saying. It's funny, a lot of people give me a hard time about wanting to be an echosonographer because they say, my imaging friends say, you're only imaging one muscle. You're only imaging one thing. How boring is that job? And I say to them, hey, man, I've shadowed sonographers that do echo, and it may be one muscle, but we've got to get 50 to 80 different images of that from multiple locations of entry. You got to go the sternal notch, you got to go subcostal, you got to go from different places, and we've got to get 50 images of that muscle, and we've got to get cine loops of it in action to determine how well the flaps are opening, the valves are opening, we've got to look for a lot of pathology. It's a very complicated. Can you think of a more complicated organ in the body than the heart? Can you live without one of your kidneys? You can't live without the heart. You've got to have it. You can even have your bladder removed and have a bladder created by another organ, another piece of tissue, a pouch, if it were, or routed outside the body, and it's collected outside the body. You can't live without the heart. So I would be proud to be an echosonographer and get expert images of that heart and determine the ejection fractions and how well it's working, and work with my cardiologist to determine what may be a possible pathology hidden within that heart. That's something you can say as far as echosonography goes, because you really have to know what you're doing in echosonography. So look at it this way. Here's another thing you can say if you're still on there, fish potato, and hit the like button while you're at it. In X-ray, if the doctor said he's got chest pain, image his chest, an X-ray tech will take a chest X-ray and say, there you go, doc. An X-ray tech does not have to say, here's what I see, and here's what I think, and this may be a problem. And as I was doing this, I noticed this. An X-ray tech doesn't do any of that. A sonographer does. A sonographer will have a dialogue with that physician and say, I noticed that when I rolled them slightly to the left, I noticed this valve did this certain thing. Or I think I saw some pathology, but I had a difficult time with it. Or there's a lot of things that if you don't capture it on your sonogram, that doc cannot find the problem. Whereas an X-ray, the doc's got the whole picture right there. It's up to the doc to figure out what's in that picture and solve it. It's up to the X-ray tech to capture the proper parameters of that picture. But on sonography, to you and your ability to scan that patient and show that doctor what is in there. Because if you don't know how to scan it and you don't capture everything you need to, he's not going to see it. Does that make sense? So you're a lot more intricately involved with the diagnosis of the pathology when you're a sonographer, because if you don't capture it in your specific images, that doc's never going to see it. So there's some more information for you. That's kind of the difference between a couple of modalities. I like CT because CT allows me to capture massive amounts of data, and you don't have to know the pathology, and you can create 3D images off of it and all kinds of cool stuff, but you still hand that off to a radiologist. And it's the radiologist that has to go through those free formats and actual images and figure out what's wrong. Yes, you start to learn what it is, what the pathology is as time goes by, and you can say, hey doc, you can do a CT PA, a PE, CT for PE, CT chest, and hey Rad, I think I got a saddle PE here. You might want to check out John Doe ASAP or whatever. And your radiologist may be like, whoa, thanks for calling that out. But that depends on your relationship with the radiologist. It's not your job to diagnose, and but you can alert your radiologist if you think you see pathology. Any tech really can do that. You can take an X-ray, a chest X-ray, and see a pneumothorax, and you might go, hey boss, you might want to look at that potential pneumothorax on that chest X-ray before you go to lunch. But when it comes to sonography, you are the eyes and ears of the radiologist or cardiologist. So big props to the sonographers. I love the field of sonography. So we're at about an hour 8. I've answered just about everything on there. Been on Clubhouse the whole time, slowly building a Clubhouse room. If you want an invite to Clubhouse, it's very hard to get in, but I do have 3 invites that I'm sitting on for the people just from YouTube and my Facebook group. Because again, with Clubhouse, I can click a button to make you an admin with me. And then, hey, Mr. MRI man, what's up? Clubhouse, you can speak across the speaker. You can join in like a live podcast with me. We're here on YouTube. All I can do is answer your questions, kind of static one way. Glad you made it in, MRI man. We're actually, him and I are talking about doing a collab together, trying to do a split screen or something where we can both talk. I think you, MRI man, I think you'd be a good candidate for an invite to Clubhouse, because then I can just turn your mic on and I can say, hey man, tell our audience about MRI and what you like about it. And then you can just talk and I can sit back. Because the MRI I did was only for like 6 months and wasn't near as extensive as some of my other stuff. So hit me up. Let's do this. You guys that are interested, go here. Let me give you a link. I'm going to give you a link to my contact form. and go there, fill out your contact information, and shoot me a request. Go there, fill out, and say, I would like a invite to Clubhouse, and I'll shoot you an invite. And then next Saturday when we do this, you hop in the Clubhouse room, and when we get to a topic of MRI, or if there's something you want to talk about, I'll give you the floor, and we can start bringing in more people besides me with expertise to share with everybody out there what we know about the field. So I think that'd be awesome. If there's no more questions, happy Saturday to everybody. Thanks for hitting the like button. We got that up to 7. That's awesome. I'll do this again next Saturday, usually before noon. I like to try to do it between 9 and 11 Mountain Standard Time. And don't forget, hit me up with questions on the Facebook group. I've already talked about that. You get lots of answers and opinions over there. I do have a LinkedIn group. If you guys go professional side, want to start building your resume on LinkedIn, that's a good place to get jobs. That's how I got one of my most recent administrator jobs. Somebody looked up radiology administrator and found me and contacted me and said, would you be interested in a job? So let's do this. Let's go. It's called the Radiologic Technologist Career Discussion, Advancement, and Mentorship, because I do offer mentorship for what that's worth to anyone that needs it, wants it. Happy to do it. Here's that link. I have an article on how to build your resume for LinkedIn, how to list the type of equipment, what a technologist should put on their LinkedIn profile, because it does show it's an online resume. It really is what it is. So we got LinkedIn covered, Facebook, YouTube, Clubhouse. I don't really tweet much. I do have a Twitter account. I think I even have an IG. I don't play with that stuff much, but let me know how I can help you guys. I'm here to help you. And visit my blog, check it out, look for articles, share it with your friends, tell your friends about it, tell your classmates, tell your program directors. I'm happy to help with anything I can. And happy Saturday. Peace out, everybody.